What is up, all you GBA type people? This is Tom. And we're here with your Week 9 Power Rankings. I now have a co-host. Talk.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Wait a second. I'm sorry. This is Burke.
Whoa, you almost threw me for a loop there, man. Almost. Warning you now, if you don't like sarcasm, leave.
Or don't.
Or leave. Or, yeah, whatever. Okay. Number 16. Sacramento Sea Kings. Talk. You talk first because I want to hear what you have to say.
Hayden has pretty much not been doing well these past few weeks. He's basically throwing the towel. And what's really weird is because of the way the conferences are, he's still technically in the playoff race, but he just kind of got styled all over this battle. He has nothing for Dragon Dance Mega Altaria. You look at his team, what honestly deals with it, and it was the Clefable, and he let that go down. So once that went down, Mega Altaria can just kind of run shop, and the two things that he had for it were Porygon 2, which instead of being a stop with Thunder Wave, just got set up all over, and then he had Choice Scarf Exploud because he thought that was going to outspeed a Mega Altaria at +1, and just so happens because of the set Miguel was running, that would happen, but you can't make that assumption that he's just going to be running the same bulky Altaria set. So it wasn't a great way because he thought it was just going to outspeed and then kill the Mega Altaria, but that didn't happen. Mega Altaria could just kind of roost off all the damage. Yeah, the biggest mistake was letting that Clefable go down. Unaware Clefable just put at least somewhat of a stop to a setup Mega Altaria, and without that, that was it. Scarfed Exploud wasn't standard, I guess, so that's a plus. But aside from that, it's mostly just kind of standardish stuff. Not really too much else to say about that. He's got 3 weeks left, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah, hopefully he does something. You pretty much said it all. He attempted to make a nice double from going to Clefable, predicting the Mega Altaria to come in between Seismitoad and Breloom. I guess, at least the attempt was there, but like you said, P2 wasn't really quote-unquote designed to take on Mega Altaria, and when in reality, outside of the 0 pairs that Miguel got, it was just set up fodder. Letting Clefable go down too early, same thing. That was his only real stop. And that being said, Hayden is done. That's why he's at the bottom, and so he's pretty much going to stay there. Assuming our number 15 actually plays his matches, right, Burke?
He could play his battles. And he didn't play this week.
No, he didn't. Number 15 is Long Arm Rockies. Now, I have a very clear principle when it comes to the GBA. Play your fucking matches. There's no... I understand real life is a thing, but, play your fucking matches. Like, if you don't play your match, I'm going to stop. Like, if he doesn't play his match next week, he takes a forfeiture or whatever, he's done. He's dead to me. That's the bottom line.
You need to play your matches. Especially, that conference is weird because everyone who is 3-6 right now is in that playoff race. Every single one of them. And if you're not going to play your matches, then you've just given up that playoff race. So.
And what's funny is, 2 weeks ago, you guys in the comments were saying that he should be ranked higher because he's in the playoffs or in playoff contention. Yeah, this is my reasoning why I'm not going to ever put him that high, because that means Guvna, which also means nothing in Ukrainian. Fun fact. Okay, number 14, Detroit Steel Wings. You talk about him.
This match, 6-0 of the week. And listen, Crimson, I don't think planned too poorly. I think he had a decent plan going into it, but one of the problems with Crimson's team is he let go of Registeel, which was his only resistance to Dragon. And Fizz brings Scarf Chomp. So he has almost nothing to take a hit from Scarf Chomp except from Intimidate Crocodile. And first he leads off with his Mega Charizard X, expecting a slow, I'm guessing, Tank Chomp, and even then, he wasn't even running that many speed EVs on his Mega Charizard X. It was probably never going to outspeed that Garchomp. And he stays in. Mega evolves and it goes down first turn. Never make that assumption. Never make the assumption that, this has got to be slow. Scout it out. Switch into your Crocodile. It's such a really simple play that has almost no repercussions unless like Fizz somehow predicts that and then goes into the perfect counter. But that is like no repercussions for that. But you stay in, you have a very likely chance that Charizard's going down first turn, and it did. Then, the Venomoth, man. The Venomoth misses the first Sleep Powder on the Electros. And instead of going out into his Roserade, which could take the second Sleep Powder, he stays in with his Electros. Okay, maybe he wants Sleep Fodder. Whatever, Electros wasn't even doing that much anyway. You switch out. You gotta switch out, because he sets up the first Quiver Dance, and Crimson had a Scarfed Infernape, which would have outsped and killed it with a Flare Blitz, but he stays in. It sets up one Quiver Dance. It sets up a second Quiver Dance. He wakes up, Volt switches out, and that's the game. He had nothing to stop. He had nothing to stop it, and because he does not have a Steel type, there was no problem with running just Sludge Bomb. The playing, we saw such improvement these past 2 weeks, and then this week comes, and he just kind of threw all that away. It was a very poor showing, and just one other thing I want to touch on was Crimson's attitude this match. He said in his prep video that it didn't matter whether he won or lost, because it was out of his hands whether he was going to make the playoffs. And I didn't, that just kind of like, because, yeah, if both, I think it was, Lars and John won, Crims was out of the race anyway, but if they both lost and you lost, you're still in a worse position to make the playoffs. You gotta win every match if you're that far behind, so don't just kind of have this lackadaisical attitude, it doesn't really matter if I win or lose. So I don't know if that had anything to do with his playing this week, but...
To kind of build off your point, I think it wasn't just the fact that he didn't have any Steel types to resist the Sludge Bomb. It was also the fact that he didn't have any fairies either for Fizz's Outrage, because there was really no detriment, as Fizz had stated, that to not go for Outrage. So with Crimson assuming that the Chomp was just set up rocks, bulky Chomp, and then Fizz out of nowhere, blat, you're dead. That was more or less on him to just like not ever really consider that. And then from there, why not go into a Crocodile? The thing was intimidating and defensive for a reason. You're just going to let it not do its job? Whatever. And then, in the middle of that, he let Electros come in, take damage for absolutely no fucking reason to get, 50% off with the HP Ice. I get the attempt, but come on. You said already, why stay in for that second Quiver Dance? Once that pretty much happened, game's over. And I suppose why he brought in Staraptor before anything else was maybe he thought that Fizz had the Bug Buzz over the Sludge Bomb. But, that was just a poor build by Crimson, and like you said, any of the momentum, any of the improvement that we saw out the window. And with this loss, I believe he's the first team done with the playoffs, because he has 7 losses. So if we have 3 weeks left, and the best teams have about 3 losses each, he can't make the playoffs. So he's done, and that's unfortunate. But Crimson is still kind of going through those growing pain type things. So I know there's mixed comments last week in regards to whether we keep ranked teams, for playoffs, or we don't. Probably going to side towards not, but that's the question I'm going to ask you guys this week. Do you want not playoff teams to be ranked still, like Hayden, Crimson, Nips, Steve? So let us know.
I just want to say one thing. I've been kind of negative towards Crimson. I do want to say his planning, though, he's trying different things. I really like that. He ran a dual Scarfers and Staraptor and Infernape, which I think he's really trying to break out of some standard planning. And I like that. Just the playing.
Number 13, Milwaukee Sawsbucks. Now, this is another prime example of how Steve's best laid plans essentially blow up in his face. Gubbs did not deserve that win. I don't care if you say that he did, he didn't. Both teams were very similar in terms they were they had these offensive powerhouses, and they just had things to complement that. As broad as that statement is, I'm going to leave it at that. I like Steve's Mesprit set this week, take on Thunderous T. It's a shame it didn't kill, though, when it needed to with the Ice Beam. But I like how Steve is, in fact, investing such EVs in a way to allow him to take hits from many things, and in this case it was Mesprit, to at least attempt to knock out the Thunderous T with the Ice Beam. A super effective hit, has enough bulk to live. You get where I'm going. It was a good play for Steve, going for the rocks, baiting Gubbs to spin with Tentacruel. It allows Steve to get offensive momentum back, and by bringing in, Mega Gardevoir, if I recall. But the point is, he's making plays, right? He's going with a plan. He's attempting to execute that plan, but things like that crit against the Conkeldurr, where the Payapa Berry with Zam would have allowed Conkeldurr to live, and then he would have been able to knock out Mega Alakazam with a knockoff. It's just, there's only so much of Steve you could watch, and after a point you're like, oh man, this guy can just never get a break. And whether it's in his comment section, on Twitter, in these rankings, in the recap, Blue knows, but even in the top plays, Steve cannot catch a break this season, and it's pretty much been his storyline for every season he's been in the GBA. The Conkeldurr set was perfectly tailored for the remainder of Gubbs' team. It's just the crit kind of said otherwise, and the game basically gave him a fat middle finger, and that was the game right there. So it's unfortunate that Steve lost another one when, how this entire season has gone, should have won, but didn't.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the crit. That's the thing. It wasn't just the crit. The Conkeldurr gets crit and dies. Steve brings in the Haxorus. He knew he had about a 90% chance to live that. I even calced it myself. I wanted to see. He was at 88%. That Psychic was going to do 90% maximum. Gubbs gets the max roll. Then the Rotom gets crit poisoned. It's just like salt in the wound right there. It's like if it wasn't just one turn that was bad enough, it was 3 turns right in a row where Steve is just, he's down, and then he's just being kicked while he's down.
Yeah.
And it just sucks for him. And that Alakazam just seems to hang on to existence through sheer hacks alone. Last week was the Hydro Miss. This week it's the crit Psychic. And I don't know, that Alakazam, there's something wrong with it. But Steve had, I think, a really good plan going into that. His sets were a little bit out there, but they were tailored to work. They were there. They were gonna work. You just had to not get hacked. It was a rather foolproof plan, but it's Steve, so it doesn't work.
Huh.
And I feel bad for him because I think he should have won that. Probably should have won that battle, but
briefly covering Gubbs. I don't have much to say about Gubbs because of the fact that I just don't think he deserved to get this win. I'm still going to give credit that he did, in fact, win. But he did have the fact that he didn't check his Thunderous. And, come on, I understand that, some people are in a bind, in a rush, but it's not that hard. Like I said last week, it's not that hard to go to the happiness checker, make sure you have all your happiness, stocked up. Go check the hidden power, ladies in Fortree City. Make sure that your hidden power is correct if you are questioning your person that gens. Not me. Make sure your Thunderous is Thunderous Theory and use the goddamn mirror. If be with Kyurem, I always made sure that I had the mirror or the fusion thingy and made it turn into Kyurem Black. There's steps that need to be taken before you click challenge whomever you're playing that week. It just comes down to prep and going through the full motion and not just skipping parts because I forgot. It's not a good excuse. It was the one thing I will give Gubbs credit for is the fact that he did mention that there have been times in GBA history where fans or the coaches or just suspicious-minded viewers have accused coaches of changing sets or maybe changing a move here or there when something happens like a DC or, you transition from Wi-Fi to Showdown. It's a minor thing, but I like that he addressed it because we haven't had that thing so far this season. But the fact still stands that it does actually happen, and I like that he recognized that and kind of shoot away those comments because, no, he has some integrity and, kept things kosher, as he said. That's it. Cubs won.
I also don't really have much to say about him. He won. He summoned some hacks, which kept him well within the battle, and he used the momentum from that crit to just kind of keep the battle going. And I feel like he played a little bit sloppy towards the end. He was making some odd plays, like going for the Will-O-Wisp on the Mega Gardevoir instead of just clicking Shadow Ball and killing it. I think he was trying to preserve differential at the end, and through trying to preserve differential, and he lost differential because I think he could have gone like a 3-0, but losing his Cofagrigus when he could have just killed off the Mega Gardevoir is just one example that just comes to mind. But it was a little bit of sloppy playing at the end, but there was really no way for him to lose that battle at that point. So that's just my minor nitpick.
Next up, we have Malvone and the Cincinnati Loud Reds. Burke, did they play this week?
Yes.
Did we see a battle?
Not that I can recall.
There we go.
Sweet.
Exactly. So, there's your rank. Good job, Malvone. You beat George. We don't know how. Calling some bullshit, but can't prove it.
Not until the battle's out.
Still gonna hold my breath on that one. See you in the grave. So I'm gonna hold my breath for a real long time on that one. This joke's awful. Number 10, New York Yankees. Shady. I will say that this match was a great match. Two very good coaches. Historically, we've seen some very fantastic matches between these two because, frankly, the way that John preps for Shady and Shady preps for John, the teams last year, teams this year, are very similar. You see Raikou, you see Melodic, Mega Venusaur. It's just the team structures kind of change, but the way they still prep and play against one another, very entertaining. A very good battle between both of them, and I appreciate it for what it is. Shady had a very, very peculiar mindset going into this match. Physical Mega Venusaur with no stab. What do you think about that?
Okay, so without the stab, I don't know how much he needed it. Granted, without the stab, Donphan actually became a pretty safe switch-in, but how often do you keep a Donphan in on a Mega Venusaur? Not very often, but with Swords Dance, it did catch John off guard, so I can't really fault him for it. But I will say, I think he's bringing these different sets, not necessarily because he knows they're going to work, just because people have been riding him to bring different things. Like, Shady, you bring Mega Venusaur with these same moves a lot. Do something different. I don't know if Venusaur really worked this week because it doesn't really do much to like a defensive Mega Scizor, and it doesn't do anything to Donphan, and it doesn't do anything to Hydreigon. So it was a weird choice.
Yeah.
But bring stuff that's different because it works, not because you think people are getting on your case because you're not.
Yeah, I think his reasoning as to why he didn't bring Power Whip was because of the Hydreigon Mega Scissors being primary switch-ins. I get it. Mega Venusaur, like you said, was a peculiar bring this week for semi-obvious. At least reasons we could easily derive from that battle. Why bring Jirachi in on that Scald and put it in danger when you have a Spadef Melodic that could have recovered off that damage and the burn would have helped you? Yeah, the residual damage would have sucked, but I'm sure it's better than getting Parahaxed. I don't know, that's just me. Maybe I'm the wrong one here. It's funny. Shady faced the same conundrum now the second time around versus John. Back in week 3, we saw they didn't have Crunch for the Reuniclus. Now we see that it doesn't have ground move. So that week he ran Earthquake. Okay, cool. It didn't necessarily pan out when he needed it to pan out, but he didn't have a dark move to cover the Uniclus, which ultimately allowed John to win. But now this week, we see that he doesn't have a ground move to take on two things now, Raikou and Lantern. But he had things like he had Waterfall, Crunch, and Ice Beam for everything else. It's like Sharpedo, he's leaning so hard on Sharpedo that it's 4-move syndrome is killing it, because he can't run what he needs to without not running something like Protect, which, let's be honest, is Sharpedo. It needs Protect because it's about as powerful as a piece of tissue paper. Defensively, of course. I like that he tried to go for the +4 Mega Venusaur. It was bold. Also, he's a very big fan of Healing Wish and Play Rough on Jirachi now. If it works, it works. The Mega Venusaur living on the 1 HP against the Raikou. Wow, that was cool. And yeah, and again, Sharpedo missing that coverage that it needed when it was needed, lost in the game. No Earthquake this time, no Crunch last time. There's your match.
Well, I definitely think part of the end game really sealed the deal. Shady still had a chance even without the Sharpedo. Melodic pretty much walled the Lantern and the Hydreigon. Like, neither of them could do much to it. Lantern, yeah, gets, Volt Switch, but it's a Lantern. Not very powerful. Melodic, very especially bulky. If he had, instead of going for the Ice Beam on the Lantern switch-in, he decided to recover up and see what happened, he probably could have won that, because he'd be at a high enough health where Draco Meteor wouldn't kill, he could recover that back off, barring, the mishaps with Paras. He could have recovered that back off, and possibly won the game just using Melodic as a just gigantic wall that it is. Overall, I think Shady, this was a very well played game, I think, by Shady. He made some really bold calls in planning and really bold plays. Like he said, going to +4 with Mega Venusaur on the Reuniclus, no less. That's bold. That's real bold. He was able to use it pretty well. I mean, it took down the Raikou, it was able to actually take hits from Reuniclus because it was not offensive, physically defensive with the Assault Vest. He was able to knock off the Scarf off the Hydreigon due to a Draco miss, which then makes Sharpedo a much scarier threat because it does outspeed. And Sharpedo, 3-move Syndrome. He can't carry enough coverage unless he went with no Protect, and he made some bold calls in team building already. If he went 4 moves no Protect, I'd like tipped my hat to him and said that's bold. Would it have worked? Probably not, because Sharpedo can't take a hit ever. I've used it. You just smack it across the face and it dies.
Use Water Gun, it dies.
Yeah, pretty much. He ain't taking any hit. But Shady is seeing, while going with some very different sets, he seems to still be leaning on some sets that he really likes, especially the Scarf Jirachi.
Or Melodic in general.
Or just Melodic in general, yeah. He's using those sets, I think, relatively well, and so he can lean on those while making some different calls in some different areas. I don't know if it didn't work this week as much as he would have liked. He still had a chance to win it throughout that entire battle, so it's not like he just got kind of shut out. But overall, I want to say a really good game played by Shady, and was an unfortunate little bit of para-flinching at the end.
At number 9, Boston Red Sox won via forfeit. Good job.
Well, Tup is actually at my number 9.
There we go.
And Tup this week, I think his planning was a little bit weird. I don't think, with Geo, he's got such a bulky team, and I don't think Tup brought enough just raw power or stall breaking to actually get through Geo's team. He let the Jellicent get toxic, which means that wasn't going to be able to wall well, and he had Jellicent as physically defensive wall, which I understand. It deals well with Entei, but not Pinsir. And you've got an Arcanine, which he used specially defensive, which I don't really understand, because, to be honest, there's not like a ton on Geo's team that's terribly specially offensive. He's got Latias, and that's it. So as long as you have something dedicated to take on Latias, use your Arcanine to take on the Entei and the Pinsir, because that's your best thing to take. A fully physically defensive Arcanine is your best thing to take those two things on, and he had especially defensive, which meant that the Stone Edge from the Entei just, there it goes.
Yep.
It's that, and then once that's gone, now he doesn't have an Intimidate to make sure at least the Mega Pinsir somewhat less of a threat, because at -1 it deals a little bit less damage. But just as well, Tup had, I felt like he was making a lot of good doubles. But along those good doubles, there was plenty of opportunities for him to get his Excadrill in on the Aromatisse and then set the rocks. Because there was no hazard removal on Geo's team this week, besides possibly bringing the Ditto in on the Excadrill and then getting a spin off, which would be a Scarfed spin, and Tup has a Jellicent. So he could play some mind games there. But he decided not to set up rocks until really late game, where it didn't even matter if the Pinsir was damaged or not, because it just comes in and cleans up.
Anyway, Tup this week. Like you said, mildly questionable plays. Why bring in Thunderous to take a Scald and a potential burn? I know it had leftovers, but it's not your biggest candidate to take a Scald. I feel like I'm having deja vu. Like you said about the Entei and the Arcanine. I believe back in week 3 I said bringing in Arcanine against Entei is mildly questionable. Yes, Entei could have won for Sacred Fire, not getting burned, what have you. But Stone Edge without the Intimidate, even with the Intimidate, if it was banded, it's going to die. It's either a 2 KO or a 1 KO without, and we saw in this case, Tup was not defensive. So, good night, Arcanine. But it was interesting to see what went through Geo's head, like what calc he ran, and then what calc Tup ran, because if we recall back in the battle, Tup said that he thought he could have lived it, but Geo said that he couldn't. So I'm sure someone will tell me how wrong I am. Maybe it was just me, but it seems as though Tup did a lot of switching in that game. There was more times where he was bringing a Mon out to try and get a matchup than he was clicking a move that was effective just in the scheme of the battle. More times than not, Tup was switching out. He was coming in, getting something to take damage, rocks damage, whatever, residual damage from some sort of status. But there's never really a time where he put his heels down, except with Kyurem when he was able to, at least, get damage on the Aromatisse. But there was never a time where he put his heels into the ground and pushed back. It's always felt like Geo was pushing him farther and farther. The only thing I will say is I was impressed with how Tup's Thunderous set and the HP investment on Kyurem just allowed him to handle things such as Geo's walls or some of his sweepers or even Ditto, because, it just seemed like he had the idea to win. It just never came to fruition. It never developed in an organic way that allowed him to get a hand up on Geo. Geo just kind of seemed to be in control more than Tup was, which, as much as we've seen Tup be a good competitor, games like this still kind of shake your confidence in somebody as, someone like a rising star in Tup, and, maybe this could be a game that pushes him out of the playoffs. Maybe I think he has to still work hard to get into the playoffs, but whereas now he is more of playing from the back rather than kind of controlling his own destiny. So I think if he did beat Geo, he would have the capability of being in a better playoff spot, I should say.
Just one thing, you mentioned the Thunderous. I really like that set. That was a fully physically offensive Thunderous, and you don't really see that very often.
No, you don't. At least not without Defiant.
No, and that was a prankster, physically offensive Thunderous, and I really wish that actually did some work, because that would have been quite interesting to see.
Yeah, maybe if he actually used to bring it in and actually do damage.
Which makes the Scald play a little bit even more questionable, because it's a physically offensive Mon.
There you go. See? That's why it didn't quite make sense. Like why also Shady brought the Jirachi in on a Scald. Sure, there's better things to take Scalds on, your respective teams.
Like Jellison.
But Jellison, I believe, was in, if I recall. Or even Celebi was physical, too. Whatever.
I love that Ditto, man. Gio, the experience from last season was awesome because he was able to successfully scout out like all of top sets.
Yeah.
He brought it down the Jellicent, the Celebi, the Thunderous. What else? He's using it so well, knowing that he wants to be able to scout out sets to make sure there's no surprises and wait for him. I know there was a look on his face when he saw the fully physically offensive Thunderous. He's just like, whoa. I'm glad I see that now. And being able to see that it was a physically offensive Celebi and being able to see all of Jellicent's moveset, granted, it's a Jellicent, so it's pretty much always running the same things. He's just been using it to great effect, and I really like that. As well as AV Spore Moongus, and I gotta give him top marks for that because he knew he was gonna get knocked off at some point in the battle, and he then had Spore, which was really good planning. I think he said he didn't really need a fourth move, so why not put Spore on there in case it gets knocked off? It'd be the thing he wants to get knocked off. Gio is showing this kind of ingenuity and planning that we've seen in pretty much all his weeks. Then he's still got that Entei and Pinsir, his offensive core, and it did what it does pretty much every week. And if someone's not entirely prepared to deal with that offense, it can just those two Mons can just overwhelm an opponent, and I think it really overwhelmed Top this week because he really didn't have switch-ins for both of them. Then again, you don't really have switch-ins for both of them. And Gio just kept up that momentum throughout the entire battle, using the Ditto to scout the set and then bringing in something that he knew could take the hits that he needed to. And just great playing Gio.
Definitely. Like you said, I do like how he's using Ditto. Scouting the movesets is very important. It's just, it seems so flawless how Gio uses Ditto, because if nothing else, in the past we've seen Ditto be used essentially just to kind of take an opponent's, setup mon or choice mon, and then just one-up it with that choice scarf. But in Gio's case, if nothing else, he uses the Ditto, just wait before I switch out, what's the moveset? And he takes a step back and he goes, what's the moveset? Okay, I wrote it down, now let me make the play. It's almost as if, Ditto is more than just, okay, this is a revenge mon, and it can take your best sweeper and use it against you, but now it's okay, well now I could see half your team if I really chose to, or got it in on the right switch. There have been times where he's used it a little bit foolishly, like last week when he brought it in with a mon behind the sub. Yeah, that was stupid, but we've seen better, like this week. I do like also the fact that he had AV and Spore. It was a bold play, but, you said it the right way. Once it got knocked off, at least it was an ace in the hole and something he could use. Also, the way that he essentially neutralized Tup's plan for using Kyurem as a cleanup mon with Aromatisse, that was cool, because Aromatisse hasn't really seen a lot of spotlight, whether it's on his team or just in general in the GBA. It's almost like the most poo-pooed on fairy, because it's not there. It's a little bit too slow. Yes, it has support moves, but not that many support moves. Things like Florges, Sylveon, even Slurpuff has seen better successes in the GBA. So seeing Aromatisse work as well for Gio as it did this week it's nice to see. However, one thing I will say about Gio is the fact that he did kind of lock his head into the fact that Kyurem had Iron Head over Earth Power. Never really considered it. He always kind of was locked on the fact that Kyurem was going to have Iron Head. So when he had the Entei in and then Tup went for the Earth Power, it just, never really crossed his mind. He made good doubles, and he, used Pinsir at the end for an easy cleanup. It was a solid match. When Gio wins well, it shows. He's one hell of a competitor, and nothing to be taken lightly. So, hopefully maybe he takes on Dan with that same ferocity as he did Tup last week. Speaking of Dan, I sneeze. See, this match between Dan and Lars was a weird one. There's this thing with DCs in the GBA. If you DC on any kind of Wi-Fi battle, it's not really the biggest deal. In the GBA, however, you DC, you do this passive thing, and some people, this might be more apparent to others than some just like kind of lax fans. But the thing with the DCs is the fact that in order to recreate your matches, sometimes you do reveal more than you want to your opponent. And I say that because, the way that you sustain momentum during the original match, because the secrecy, the tricks in the bag, they're still there. But when you're trying to recreate a match, especially with how deep that match had gone in the first time, the second time, it throws off everything that you're trying to do in that match, because there's no surprises. There's no way that you're able to recreate and then still have that same momentum that you might have had earlier on. Dan suffered that this week. He had good ideas. It wasn't a bad idea the way that he led with Salamence. What was really going to take a Draco or an Outrage on Lars's team? The fact that he had a good mixed wall breaker Mence. Shout out to 4th Gen, and it was very effective against walls on Lars's team, like Tangrowth or even, Slowking to an extent. But it's just, with the confidence he had going into the match, and then just things kind of just slowly trickling out of his control, so much to the point that Thunderous just basically came in and took that match away from him. He can't miss it. Dan cannot hit a Toxic to save his life. Like, it's astounding, honestly. It really is. Like, for a move that I almost think is automatic to hit, he is. Wow, that is.
I think he's at like 60%, somewhere in there, for hitting Toxics.
That still sounds so awful.
That's 30% lower than it should hit.
Right. 70% my ass.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say about the DCs also, and I am about to compare Pokemon to sports, so if you don't want to hear this part,
sports. Okay.
When there's like a DC, and there's like a timeout in any kind of sports, you lose the mindset after getting back off the field. You come back on, it's different. A lot of times you're not playing as well as you were, or someone who's kind of down is thinking more clearly as they come back. And so Dan was holding the momentum before the DCs, and then the DCs happen, and I think he's getting aggravated. It requires a lot of time, and I think he wanted to play different. He was also playing some other match he had to play after that, and it's just taking up time, and all this stuff is happening. And I think that kind of messed with his head a little bit during that entire battle, because he needed to save that Uxie. He absolutely needed to save that Uxie. And what does he do? He doesn't save the Uxie. He lets it go down to 2 knockoffs from the Thunderous, and then that's game. So I think it was like a combination of the DCs just kind of messed with them, and the fact that he honestly didn't really have a switch into Lando. I mean, it's not a mon you have an easy switch into, but I don't know. He had to bank everything on Uxie, and he let it get down too low. And then once it got down too low, Lars just has to predict that thing to come in, go for the knockoff once, go for the knockoff again, and we're done with the match. Granted, there was another DC, but they talked it out, and Lando's going to sweep. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I think Dan was also salty at that point. I think a better comparison for anyone to make, really, is you guys remember the 2012 Ravens-Niners game, the Blackout Super Bowl? Something like that. Team goes from being essentially on fire to allowing the other team to catch up and almost win. So if you want to understand that example, then it worked. Okay. Number 5, the New Orleans Pelicans. Now I'm putting John back, John and Lars for that matter, back above Dan. Again, these 3 teams are honestly interchangeable. I don't think there's really an argument to be had that these 3 teams don't There's no reason they don't belong here. It's just the order of which they rank between 4 and 6. It swaps every week. So this week we have, John a little higher. John had a very solid plan this week, having 4 potential pivot mons, 2 with U-turn, 2 with Volt Switch. John is a big fan of using things like U-turn and Volt Switch because with his playstyle, he prefers to get that clean movement amongst his team to ensure positive matchups, because him with like hard switches, when I played him, wasn't necessarily the best option for him sometimes, so having the things like U-turn and Volt Switch, very effective, and we've seen that a lot this season. Reuniclus had awesome coverage for all of Shay's mons this week, and it seems like he's really in love with Regenerator Reuniclus. Very cool seeing him use Regenerator over things like Magic Guard, because prior to this season, I'm not sure there were many examples of Reuniclus not having Magic Guard over anything else. This season, I think we've seen Overcoat. If it wasn't this season, it was last season. But then we've seen a lot of Regenerator with Assault Vest. It's almost like this emergence of a new way to use an old mon. That sounds like fucking poetry. But besides that, I really like how John used Mega Scissor to live the EQ, and then also the way he got it in freely versus Rhyperior, an attempt to roost when Shady was going for the Stealth Rocks. Now, it died to the Fire Punch right after, but it was good. It was a very good attempt, at least for John. I like the fact that he's using Lantern very smart. Even though we did already discuss Sharpedo, I think it did allow him to stave off the late game Sharpedo sweep, even if it was just to get that necessary Volt Switch damage, because remember, Sharpedo was in fact Life Orb. And then finally, I don't like the fact that he went for the Dirtbag strat at the end with the Paraflinch, the Dark Pulse, into the fact that Melodic was already paralyzed. He was merciful though, but I don't know, Paraflinching never really settles well with me because of the fact that I've been on the awful side of the whole Paraflinching game, and it gives me awful nightmares. Please stop it, John. Stop it.
John, Shady didn't even do that to you last time. Now you're going to try it against him?
Dirtbag.
I just got a few things to say about John. He loves that Regenerator Uniclus, and if it works, it works. Keep going with it. I think it's going to be a lot more predictable because this is the second week he's rocked not the same moves, but the exact same set in terms of probably like EV spread. It was physically defensive with Assault Vest, second week in a row. He's probably going to have to rely on that a little bit less just because people are going to kind of see that coming now. Who knows, maybe you just catch him off guard with the classic Trick Room set, but we'll see. It was an interesting choice to put Player Off on Donphan. It made sure that Zygarde couldn't set up on the Donphan in case it was brought, because Zygarde, if it starts setting up like a coil or two, that's scary. That's really scary for any team. But Player Off made sure that that was never going to happen, at least on the Donphan. So I like that, and pivoting, lots and lots of pivoting. John likes it. Why make hard reads and switches when you can just pivot out? Sure. It's a lot safer, and you almost always get the upper hand. John kind of summoning the crits when he thought he needed them. He had his Raikou in on the Mega Venusaur, and he's like, I need a crit extrasensory, I need a crit extrasensory, and then he gets a crit extrasensory. Didn't work though, because the Mega Venusaur lived and then went for Synthesis. But he tried, and it didn't work. But the way he set up that whole Raikou versus Mega Venusaur, he made sure that no matter what happened, the Mega Venusaur was not coming out with a good amount of HP, which meant it could easily have been revenge killed. Which it almost was, but then Hydreigon missed the Draco. So that wasn't good. But at the very least, he set it up so that he was coming out on top in that exchange. I feel like through the beginning of the game, he had a lot of good momentum going. But then we get to the Mega Venusaur versus the Reuniclus, and he kind of lets go of that a little bit. He starts making a little bit of over predictions, and he lets the Mega Venusaur set up, and it looked kind of scary for him for a while, but the lack of coverage on the Mega Venusaur made sure that it couldn't do too much damage, but at the same time still being kind of a threat. But John handled that pretty well. And then at the end, going for those dirtbag tactics. I know I just said, why would you do that? I understand it. It's very tempting. It's the dark side. Don't go to the dark side. It's very tempting to go for it. Don't. But if it gave him the best chance to win, then, you know, I know when I was doing the recast week 3, we said, Shady, you should have gone for the Iron Head and just went scumbag and killed the Reuniclus off that way. But apparently neither of them liked that tactic, and I commend them both for that greatly. But that's all I got for John. He played well. He played very well, and I think he was on pretty equal footing with Shady this week.
Next up, the Brushadon fan. Lars, I would call this a comeback, except it wasn't the most prestigious comeback. It sucks that he let Crobat die so early, really put him on his heels very quickly. The DCs definitely affected how Lars played this match. It seemed like after every disconnection, and you know, as it led up into the end, Dan lost more momentum and confidence, I should say, while Lars was able to adjust just a little bit more, because I think he was able to adjust to the unique capability of Dan's moves and movesets with all of his mons. It was a good bait for Lars going into Druddigon and then forcing Dan to go for rest on Mega Aggron, because then it allowed him to get Lars in for free, so then when Dan switched out and the Rock Polish was up, well, it was a good game. The residual damage overall, along with the rough skin on Druddigon, as well as the Stealth Rock and the Recreation damage, yes, that's an actual thing, because that actually did affect this match. From the beginning to end, that damage between switches and bullshit moves and yada 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 allowed Thunderous to sweep. I think this is a much different win, or loss perhaps, without all those DCs. I think that Dan probably would have scooped this one from Lars, because I don't think that without those DCs Lars had as much of a chance.
Yeah. There was some kind of questionable planning on Lars' part. He didn't bring the Azumarill, which was a little bit odd for me, because, granted, Lars doesn't know what kind of set that Salamence was going to be running, but Azumarill actually just completely walled that Salamence and threatened it out every single time, because it had Earthquake, which is going to do decent damage to the Azumarill, but it also had Draco Meteor and Fire Blast, which, if it was more especially offensive, that Earthquake's not going to do enough to really threaten the Azumarill. He doesn't bring that, which was his only good switch into a Draco. So that I was questioning kind of a little bit, because it does quite a bit of damage to Dan's team despite the Mega Aggron. Lars, as well in planning, he seems to just kind of lean on these really few comfortable sets. AV Tangrowth, Rock Polish Landorus, Rocky Helmet Druddigon. We've seen this many weeks. Especially the AV Tangrowth. I don't think he's running any other way. And I think it's starting to become a little bit predictable, because anytime you see the Tangrowth, oh, it's probably AV. Takes the special hit. It's definitely AV. So, I don't know. In other regards, and I guess I said this the same thing for Shady, where they're starting to get comfortable with these few sets. I don't know how effective they're going to continue to keep being. But again, we'll see. Lars is a good battler, so I know he uses them well, but to me it's just a little bit predictable.
I mean, in their defense, it has been 9 weeks, so maybe this whole complacency could also be misinterpreted to the fact that we've kind of seen all the bags of tricks now, so it's kind of getting to that point now where it just turns into raw play over surprising, unique sets, so to say.
Yeah, no, I get that, and maybe I'm just harping on this a little bit too much, but that's just something I say. I do really like the fact that he's playing that Druddigon really well. He baited the Uxie to go for the U-turn. He baited the Aggron to go for rest. That U-turn damage on the Druddigon, it allowed Uxie to get damage from the Rocky Helmet and the Rough Skin, bring it way down, so then Landorus could actually take it out with 2 knockoffs after the Cobra Berry. So that was his playing just shows that he's been doing really good. I don't know how the DCs would have affected it. Had the DCs not happened, would he still have been able to get that Rock Polish Lando sweep? It's possible. The only thing stopping it was that Yuxi, and he made sure to get it down enough HP where it wasn't going to be a problem. So Lars playing well, and I think he's my number 5. I have him below John, and really it is interchangeable at this point. I didn't know where to put him. I'm just like, he'd be 4, he could be 5, he could be 6. Let's put him at 5.
At number 3, the San Francisco 49ers. George didn't upload. Don't ask me why. He lost to Movone. Don't ask me how. Cool.
Sweet.
Number 2, Real Moril. Miguel. In Miguel's intro, he discussed he had 2 fights this week. One of which gave him a black eye. The second one gave the other guy a sore butthole. The other guy being Hayden. He gave him a sore butthole. He did him dirty. Real dirty. That
took him to Pound Town.
Took him deep into downtown Pound Town. Like the alleys you don't go to when the sun goes down, Pound Town. Oh man, Miguel played a very, wouldn't say smart. It was more like a calculated type game. It was ballsy when it needed to. It was safe when it needed to. He knew his sets. He knew Hayden's set. It didn't matter. Hayden couldn't do much. Mega Altaria, bang bang, thank you ma'am, have a good night, put some ice on that ass, and Fast Seismitoad with Sludge Wave, Hydro Pump, Rain Dance. It was cool, and was able to live that Scarf X-Plod Boom Burst. That was cool.
And died a Life Orb, which wasn't really cool, but
still lived a Boom Burst.
Still lived a Boom Burst. I really like that Life Orb set. It was pretty interesting, because he made sure to outsped the Breloom, so he knew he could get up rocks, which is what he needed. Because the only other thing that could stop the Mega Altaria was the Breloom if it still had its Sash, because it would take the hit and put the Mega Altaria to sleep, and then at least Hayden could have tried to do something. But he made sure the rocks got up, and he did get a little bit of luck. The Seismitoad did wake up, I think, like turn 2 or turn 1.
Yeah.
After it got put to sleep, and then was able to take out the Clefable. And did that really affect who won? Not at all. I have full confidence that if Seismitoad stayed asleep for all 5 turns and died, there was no way Hayden was getting out of this one. Well, there was nothing stopping that Mega Altaria sweep. And especially after Clefable went down, now there's really nothing stopping the Mega Altaria sweep.
And number 1, Fizz, finally, you're welcome. It's hashtag, what was it, best for the business, I think, was the tweet towards me. Anyway, for people who don't know, Fizz tweeted me, apparently in his comment section, someone said that for every week that Fizz is number 1 in the power rankings, so one of his fans, I suppose, would wear a shirt and then like pose in it, so best for the business. You get it, because shirts, he makes money off of those, right? Okay.
I get it.
See, I had to explain that for the cavemen in our comment section sometimes.
Understandable.
Very. Now, the thing that wasn't very understandable in Fizz's words was how Crimson took on the Venomoth. Do you understand Venomoth now, Crimson? Do you? Because just like the previous match, Crimson was also taken to where, Burke?
The Pound Town.
Pound Town, that's right. We're having way too much fun with this. Holy shit, okay. Nothing on Crimson's team could take a Sludge Bomb. Nothing on Crimson's team could take an Outrage. Lo and behold, that's pretty much what did it in for him. Fizz recognized that Crimson had 0 capabilities of taking on things that were poison or dragon related, and he took advantage of that, and Venomoth, of all things, got a 5-0 sweep. I like Venomoth in terms of what it looks like. I've never actually really used Venomoth and with much success, but we see this week that Venomoth was a hot commodity for Fizz, and it worked out, and it was cool to watch, I suppose. not sure it's going to happen again. But this is certainly a loss that Crimson won't forget, and Fizz is probably going to bask in for maybe another 2 days. Who knows?
Yeah, Fizz told us to put it number 1, or we're doing it wrong, and I was really, really tempted to put him at number 2 again. I was really tempted, but he's 8-1, and that was. Whew. I said the Mega Altari was a sweep. This is even a worse sweep because at least Mega Altari is better.
Yeah.
But I didn't really see this as much of a win for Fizz as just a loss for Crimson, because Fizz was just kind of handed that win when Electros stayed in.
Yeah.
It's just, please sweep me.
Loss of Crimson's booty integrity.
And Fizz took advantage of it. He set up that second Quiver Dance, and Venomoth, despite that only base 90 special attack, was able to kill everything in one hit with a Life Orb and a +2. Games played? 1. Games won? 1. Kills? 5. Congratulations, Fizz. It's never happening again. I'd like you to prove me wrong, but I don't see it ever happening again.
So that's it with the power rankings this week. Hope you all enjoyed. Leave your comments and concerns and likes or dislikes. Mostly dislikes for Burke. Because,
Wow.
You're welcome.
Wow.
I had to say it once, man.
That's true. I deserve them.
But seriously, hope you guys enjoyed. So Burke will be filling in from now until week 12, and probably the previews leading into the playoffs, because we will not rank per se, but just discuss for a while the propensity of all of the playoff teams. Words.
Awesome.
But again, comments down below. Let us know what you think. Leave your own rankings. And yeah, with that being said, we'll see you on Sunday. Hopefully more than 12 matches get uploaded.
We can only hope at this point.
But yeah, and as always, just if you want teams that are no longer in playoff contention to be ranked, give us one more convincing comment as to why they should or shouldn't. Otherwise, we're making that executive decision, which is mostly going to be, let's save our asses time in editing to not rank them. So that being said, hope you all have a good week. Enjoy Sunday. Burke, say something.
Something.
Perfect. Bye.